Debate needed on free speech limits in digital era. Well, at first glance, this is nothing new from the loony left, liberal mainstream media. But we're seeing more and more of this. And don't forget, the strategy of the left is always to be pushing the goalposts further back. If you give an inch, they push it back a mile. And of course, we saw this primarily with the feminists like Anita Sarkeesian, where everything, well, we all know the famous line. I'll just point this out. It is time for a broad public debate about the boundaries of acceptable speech. No, there isn't. There isn't ever time for a debate on what's acceptable speech. There is acceptable speech to who? We all know how that argument goes. Well, it's free speech, but no hate speech. Of course, what exactly, as we've seen recently, I mean, just disagreeing with Antifa, who are basically being investigated as a terrorist organization. That's called hate speech. And the SJWs who support them, and the many of the Democrats who support them, and CNN who support them, want to say disagreeing with them is hate speech, and therefore your speech should be curbed. And of course, Antifa's whole agenda is to deplatform and shut down free speech as the fascist organization that they are, the terrorist fascist organization that they are. So then more recently, Ryerson University, their free speech panel was canceled, and again, thanks to Antifa, who made it very clear that they would be out in force, that they would be using violence to shut down this talk, basically because they disagree with it, and then it becomes hate speech. So this is the debate that the so-called mainstream media, and obviously it's so-called because they are so quickly becoming not the mainstream as they become crazier and crazier and reveal their leftist diatribes more and more. Then there was and also invited to that panel was Jordan Peterson. Then when that got canceled, there was going to be a comedy show also in Toronto. And it was ironically titled something, sorry, I should take the 2 seconds to look it up. It was ironically called like, free speech equals hate speech or something like that, as a tongue-in-cheek ironic title. That got shut down because we can't even make jokes about the SJWs. We can't even make jokes about using violence to shut these people down. And yeah, and if you haven't heard Jordan Peterson, and he goes on at some length exactly about this, about the C16 and the controlling of speech. And that is where it begins. You begin with telling people what pronouns they can and cannot use. And then it becomes, well, that joke's offensive. We can't have that. That's got to be shut down. And so on and so forth. Now, what's even scarier, besides the crazy, loony left mainstream media, Antifa, and the SJWs, is the UN asking the United States to basically suspend the First Amendment. And media in the United States, instead of being, up in arms against the First Amendment, which guarantees their livelihood, which gives them the right to publish and write and say and broadcast. It'd be nice if they broadcast objectively, or at least something a little bit balanced, but whatever. You're right to say whatever you want. And, aside from calling for someone to die, we can all get behind that. But anyways, okay, so now the UN, and this is being championed by CNN, big surprise, the very fake news network, want to shut down people because, the so-called race. Now, notice they call it racist rhetoric. Now, notice, of course, that if it was Muslims, and this has happened in Canada, calling for the stoning of all homosexuals, or telling women that they have to cover up, that right, of course, to say those things is protected. If you're a Christian preacher saying that homosexuals are, it's a sin or what have you, you'll be convicted of a hate crime. And that actually happened in Canada. It's one of our low points. So that unfortunately has become case law in Canada. And now UN puppet Justin Selfie Boy Trudeau, who just loves the UN, who can't do enough to go and get his pat on the head from the UN. He is, of course, joining along with the other European Western nations in controlling hate speech. In Britain, so-called hate speech. In Britain, police tweet proudly that they are monitoring citizens for thought crimes and arresting citizens and charging them for saying the wrong things. In Germany, of course, you can find your door broken down by the police for not just saying something, but for agreeing with someone on social media, as that actually happened. Someone on Facebook just liked a comment that was deemed hate, meaning that it was, anti-immigrant, anti-Islam, or some damn thing. Again, I'll note the double standard that if you say that you want to punch a Nazi, or you want to kill a Nazi, or you want to, and of course, as usual, that being just people who disagree with you. Twitter and all the other social media and the powers that be have no problem with that. You can do what we generally consider is the limits of free speech, which is a call for violence, a call for issuing death threats. But that aside, let's back to the UN. Now remember, Obama handed over control of the UN, of the internet to the UN. So yes, I'm not hardly the biggest conspiracy theorist. In fact, I'm not at all a conspiracy theorist. But when I see the UN calling for the suspension of the First Amendment, and I see media in the United States agreeing with it, it certainly makes you sit up and take notice. So hats off to a certain sarcastic Bearing, all the way over in Australia, for bringing this to my attention, or bringing this to everyone's attention. He's actually been, I think, at the forefront of a lot of free speech issues, especially in Canada. For anti-free speech movements in Canada, I've actually heard it oftentimes, first and foremost, from Bearing all the way over, half a world away, which is another scary thought that even goes on. But, thank goodness for YouTubers like him. Anyways, that's it for Bourbon and Bullets today. It was a little disjointed, but again, it was something that caught my eye, and I just wanted to get it out. So turn in next week for another episode of How Low Can the Media Go?